What's the problem in Missouri? Or is that too negative of an approach? Is everything fine?
Right now, they're trying to figure out exactly what they're going to do this session. Most sessions, when the Missouri legislators go in, they usually have already a goal announced, or there's like a tax cut or something. And this session is unusual in that there doesn't seem to be a defined agenda, other than they are revisiting the whole school transfer situation, the bill that was vetoed by the governor that would affect Normandy and Riverview.
School transfer, and there are a lot of issues from Ferguson. Is that surprising to you guys that there isn't more of a defined agenda going in with all that's been in the news?
Well, because most of the stuff that went on in Ferguson, the state can't solve, or at least this is what the legislators say.
That's interesting, because I've heard a lot of municipalities say a lot of these issues that come out of Ferguson, the municipalities can't solve. We need the state when it comes to the way they collect revenue or other things.
I think that there are select issues which state legislators are taking the lead on. One of the later guests that'll be on the show, Senator Eric Schmidt of Glendale, has put forth a bill that would restrict the amount of traffic fine revenue that a city can have in its budget. And that was kind of an issue that came to the forefront after the Ferguson protests. I know another one of your guests, Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal, has put forth a multifaceted bill that deals with what police can do, for example, in a protest with tear gas, or many other things which I'm sure she'll explain in full. And there's also been some talk about the structure of St. Louis County, about possibly eliminating some of the municipalities by fiat, or making it easier to eliminate municipalities by fiat, another issue that kind of came to the forefront. But as Joe will probably mention, all these things are going to encounter some sort of opposition, even something like the municipal court changes, which seems to have a lot of legislative consensus. The Municipal League of Missouri doesn't approve of that, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of cities that are going to push back against that as well.
Most of those proposals will go nowhere. I'm not saying whether I like them or not. Yes.
Proposals.
I'm not saying whether I like them or not. I'm just saying the reality of the political environment in Jefferson City is such. Even the court proposal, which probably has the best chance of passing, the problem is that it would affect a lot of these rural communities as well, who also get a sizable chunk of their revenue from traffic fines, speeding tickets. And so rural legislators are already hearing about that, because Senator Schmidt's bill would limit it to 10% of their budget. Anything they collect beyond that would have to go to the state. Right now it's 30%. So, and you've got some critics like Senator Nadal who say, well, the court thing really has nothing to do with what was going on in Ferguson. It has nothing to do with the protests, that we're dealing with
many
police,
of the things that are in her bills.
Yeah, police and racial issues, and that really doesn't have anything to do with courts. So you're going to have back and forth on that, but the bottom line is you've got a lot of legislators who privately say nothing's going to happen, or if something does happen, it'll be minor.
You mentioned the climate in Jefferson City. It's the opposite of the makeup in Illinois, where you have a Democratic governor and Republican legislature.
I was just going to say, I think we're in a period of transition in Missouri politics. You have the governor, Democratic Governor Jay Nixon, who's term limited. You have an overwhelmingly Republican legislature, more Republican than it's ever been before. And he just went through a few months where he stepped into the national spotlight perhaps for the wrong reasons. And I don't think that his political power before Ferguson was particularly strong with the legislature. And I'm sure after Ferguson, even though I hear he's engaging more, it's not terribly strong right now. So I think in this transition period, where you're basically having people running for governor in the background, both Republican and Democratic, where somebody else is going to come and deal with the legislature after 2016. I'm sure there will be things that happen which are tangible and sizable. I never like to say that the legislature has done nothing or they're not going to accomplish anything, because I feel like that's very overgeneralizing. But until this transition period is over, after November 2016, I think we're just going to be kind of waiting to see what happens next.
Whatever his reasons for stepping in, he might not like the reviews of his performance in Ferguson. Did Ferguson, you think, hurt our lawmakers, our governing, their ability to govern, the governor's ability to govern at the state level?
Well, the problem is that Nixon He's a lawyer. He's a smart guy, but he just didn't come across well on television. I know that sounds very superficial, but appearances matter, especially on a national stage. And other states were looking toward him because a lot of Democrats have been seeing him on the short list for a possible vice presidential nominee, perhaps, or maybe a cabinet position, and that's what he's been aiming for.
He had on his resume Democratic governor in what is now a red state.
Correct, and he's from the Midwest, and he's the right age. So both parties often need somebody from the Midwest to balance the ticket, because anymore the presidential candidate, except for Obama, often has been from the coast, one or the other. So they look to the Midwest to balance the ticket. And Nixon, because he's not too old, and he was a Democrat in a red state, was on that short list. And his performance, fair or unfair, hurt him.
Not only is he not going to be a vice presidential candidate, I don't. If he was even talked about as a U.S. Senate candidate against Roy Blunt, I mean, I think he said that wasn't going to happen, even if he wanted to. I don't think it's happening.
All right, let's bring it back to what we might expect from our state house this year. Speaking of the governor, he's mentioned tolls rather on I-70. Is that something, because we've heard a lot about how there's not enough money to take care of our roads?
I don't know, is the governor driven through Illinois? I think his opinion of toll roads might change, but go ahead, Joe.
Well, the reason he's been proposing toll roads is because the transportation proposal that was put on the ballot last year, just a few months ago, failed hugely. So voters didn't want to pay a higher sales tax to pay for transportation, and Missouri, everybody agrees that Interstate 70's got to be widened, improved. So there has been some speculation that his administration was going to see if they could institute some sort of toll roads without even getting legislative approval. Now, Speaker John Deal, who's a Republican from the St. Louis area, he's cool on toll roads, and he doesn't think the legislature will go along with it. But he's watching because he's been wondering if the governor might try to do some sort of executive fiat thing.
It's just a major problem because I think that there are obvious needs with Missouri's transportation, but nobody has come up with a good way to pay for a lot of repairs. Obviously, the sales tax, which we talked about ad nauseum on Stay Tuned and many other shows, before August 9th.
I don't know if anyone actually got nauseous.
No, but I mean, nobody liked that. Nobody wants to raise the gas tax. Nobody wants to toll anything. Yet, I think that there are legitimate transportation needs, and this just seems to be a vexing problem with no obvious solution. So
definitely legitimate education needs. You started to mention that.
Yes,
will we see something there?
Now, the governor, in less than a week, will be giving a State of the State address, and traditionally that's also where he outlines his budget proposal. And the budget is the main thing the General Assembly does. Of the 5.5 months that the General Assembly is in operation, it's mainly the budget. And so last year he called for fully funding the school aid formula. That didn't happen, but there was a little extra money. He is expected to try to engage this time to try to come up with some sort of transfer proposal that he can support. If you recall, he vetoed the one the General Assembly gave him a few months ago because it had a provision for private schools getting money, and he said that isn't.
Even though a lot of people would say that's pretty watered down and that no private school would ever actually get any money.
Exactly. The senator who is one of the key drivers of the new version said that. And it's interesting because that senator has served on a school board, public school board. So I think some are becoming aware of the fact, so they may have a provision that's so watered down. But even then, I think that the governor will be under a lot of pressure from public school teachers and other groups that are often traditionally close to Democrats not to even approve that, because the idea of being that if you get, even if it's watered down, if you get that started, that there's no end in sight.
And if that happens, the school transfer law is still in effect, although how DESE interprets it is kind of up for debate.
Okay.